I'm Michael Krasny, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Gray Matter with Michael Krasny, a weekly podcast of deep dive interviews with national and international authors, journalists, tech and business experts, artists, scientists, entertainers, and opinion shapers. And you can become a member of this podcast by going to graymatter.show, and that's gray with an E, and you can stream us live at 11 a.m. Pacific time on Fridays when we include your questions and comments. We'll be doing some audios for you in the next couple of weeks, taking a little time off, but they will be authors worth hearing. As you know, those of you who are familiar with us, we cover a wide range of intellectually engaging and timely stimulating topics distinguished by high level content and technical excellence. And in this episode of Gray Matter with Michael Krasny, we welcome celebrated author Amy Tan, author of such fictional works as The Joy Luck Club, which became a 1993 motion picture, The Kitchen God's Wife, The Bone Setter's Daughter, Saving Fish from Drowning, and The Valley of Amazement, and I think I've interviewed her on all of those books. She also is the author of a couple of children's books and is a recipient of the National Humanities Medal, Carl Sandburg Award, and the Commonwealth Award Distinguished Service. She has a bachelor's and master's degree from San Jose State, took doctoral courses in linguistics at UC Santa Cruz and UC Berkeley. She was also a member of the All Authors Garage rock band Rock Bottom Remainders and dressed most often as a dominatrix. She's a friend of mine of many years who I want to congratulate on her highly praised and really profoundly well received most recent book, The Backyard Bird Chronicles, which we'll have an opportunity to talk about. And I've said publicly, you need not be a birder, a bird watcher, or a bird lover to deeply appreciate the book. And welcome, Amy Tan.
Nice to be here, Michael.
Good to have you here. We're in the digital world now, but it's also very welcoming, and people will have questions, and I certainly have many things to ask you about this book and other things. This latest book of yours, I think it's safe to say, came about as a result of, I'll quote Wordsworth here, the world was maybe too much with you at the time, from what I've been able to glean. You were down
Yeah.
and you wanted to commune with nature the way Wordsworth did, the way the Romantic poets did.
Well, the impetus was really to get away from the profound sadness and despair I felt during the election campaigns of 2016. There was a lot of overt racism, and it was the kind that made me wonder if it had always been there but unspoken. And more was directed than I'd ever experienced, and also to Asian American communities. So I decided to go into nature journaling as a way to just shut it out for a while.
Well, let me commend you first on the book and then also on the illustrations. I remember years ago you said, I really wanted to be an artist, and I think you've claimed that now, at least where birds are concerned, certainly, and congratulations.
Yeah.
All uh, let's talk about um, what you've done here, about the book itself. I mean, the drawings are really impressive. Let me say that first of all, and the book itself leads us into the world of birds that even some of the people who know the world of ornithology and are Audubon Society members and all the rest may have very little familiar with or little understanding with. I mean, you approach the world of birds like a novelist, don't you?
I found that I was making observations in the same way that I make observations in books, that I have to understand the characters, but I had to imagine I was the characters. And when I looked at birds, I would imagine I was the bird as I was drawing it to try and understand its intentions, which is impossible to do if you're a human looking at a bird. So, but I would guess at them. And that was fun for me.
It's
But
very
this
anthropomorphic, isn't it? I mean,
anthropomorphic in a way, but stepping away from the danger of those assumptions at times to say, I don't really know, but it's fun to guess. And I also talked to some biologists who do actual scientific research, and they said alleviating some of my feelings of shame and adding, attributing anthropomorphic qualities. They said, well, it's not a bad platform to start investigating questions. For example, like love, and very respected biologists have looked at that question in birds. So it was, I felt I had been given uh, an anti-stupidity, uh, pass for making these anthropomorphic guesses.
Well, they're more than guesses. I mean, you see and observe and watch very carefully the way they interact and come to conclusions about their interactions. And they have different personalities. I mean, I know a guy who raises chickens and he swears, their personalities are so different that he can define them by the way they behave.
Oh, yeah. I saw that from the beginning with a little fledgling, and you could see that there would be a leader and the others would follow. Some were scared, some were brave, some, were more interested in one thing over the other. And I saw that in the beginning, and I would start to notice both, in a way, personality traits of species, but personality traits of individuals. And it is the individual bird that became more fascinating to me than strictly species.
Well, as a longtime dog lover, well, we both are, we know dogs have different personalities, different breeds have different personalities. It's true
Yes.
for certainly a lot of members of the animal kingdom. And what I realized was you have an interest in birds that goes way back, I mean, to childhood. And I didn't know, I always knew your father was a Baptist minister and an engineer. I didn't know he was an ornithologist, too.
No, no, he wasn't an ornithologist. That was maybe David Sibley was the father had an ornithologist. My parents, my father, it turned out I learned after he died, did love nature, but he was not um, in particular interested in birds. No one in my family pointed out birds to me. It in part there's a vocabulary paucity that when you're a second language speaker, you don't know the species names. There's a bush, there's a tree, some flowers, there's birds, there's dogs, but you don't know the exact species. So that's what I grew up with.
But you grew up with certainly the kind of appreciation for animals that has defined a lot of your. I think I remember you talking about what compassionate suckers we are, doing kinds of things like for the Humane Society, which we did together, and
Yeah.
supporting
Yeah.
those kinds of organizations. You got a real coup, though. You got a forward written by David Allen Sibley, who's one of the real foremost bird experts in the world.
He is amazing. And this is what surprised me about David Sibley when we were walking. And I said, "Where did you get your degree in ornithology?" And he said, "I never got one. I went to Cornell for 1 year to study. And then I decided, no, I should just, self study and go out and do what I love." And that is his education. However, he probably was reading and he had his father as his resource to go to as well. And he started at a very young age.
Well, it was amazing to have him write the foreword, and I know you must be really thrilled with that and feel very lucky. But
Yeah, incredibly lucky. I just got to tell you one thing that it was another lucky moment. I was birding with him. This is during the publication launch, and I was birding in Central Park, and I saw a bird doing something, and I thought, oh, is there a regional difference in what they do, these white-throated sparrows, between New York and California? And I was going to look it up in my Sibley app, and then suddenly I thought, oh, I got the Sibley app right next to me, the live Sibley app. And I turned to him and I said, "David," and I got my answer right there. Yes, there are regional differences.
and you have been, for the most part, feeding and communing with California birds, which have a whole different, shall we say, genealogy, a whole different color to them. Hmm?
Yeah, there are some commonalities, of course, like crows and ravens, but that species will differ. And so when people come from the East Coast to California, they're very excited to see something like a California towhee, or a rentit. But and when I go to, I live part time in New York. When I go to Central Park, I'll see a blue jay there, or I'll see a cardinal, and I'm really excited. And those are just the usual nothing birds to people there who live there and see them all the time.
But you had
Uh,
70 species and still counting in your backyard.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm up to actually 70, and I'm not counting. I could be 78 if I were to count the birds I see flying over the bay. But I have my own rules, and I have to see the bird. I can't just hear the bird when I'm counting for a new bird, and I will only count those that are in the yard or really immediate vicinity. So it can't be a bird like a cormorant that would never land in my yard. Now I say that, great blue heron, no, impossible. And then a great blue heron came and landed on our roof. So I get to call that one a yard bird, but it was a fluke.
You think they're grateful for all the nurturing and feeding that you're doing for them?
I wouldn't say gratitude is among the anthropomorphic qualities that I would ascribe to birds, but they know that I am food. Amy equals food. So I would walk out and I'd hear very excited chattering. She's here. She's, bringing the food. Sometimes they would become impatient and they couldn't uh, wait for me. So they'd come closer and closer, like they want to be the first ones to hop on the food. Yeah, they know I'm not a danger, that I do bring food. Um, and but I don't think they are grateful as much as they are just excited to see food.
Hungry. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're excited to see food. Yeah.
And there's a wonderful photo of you with a bird right by your nose. It reminded me of I had a parakeet who used to come and land on my hand and eat birdseed out of my finger and so forth. I mean, you do kind of
Yeah.
develop a certain sort of bond. They're
Absolutely.
very
Yeah.
complex creatures. When I think of migrations, for example, and I've through the years I've thought it's so inscrutable to us how they do those migrations and how they go long expanses and go exactly
Yeah.
to the same
Yeah.
exact spot
Yeah.
that they started in.
Yeah. Yeah. The golden crown sparrows that come to our yard at the end of September have flown from Alaska or northern Canada. And you have to imagine that distance. It's well over, 2,000 miles, and they're flying to my yard. Now, I know that they have been here before and that it is the GPS uh, markings of where I am that guide them to here. And the reason I know is that I built these cages for as feeders. And it takes a bird several hours to a day to figure out how to get in. It has their favorite food in there. When I see a bird that arrives, a migrant that has just arrived, and they fly right into that cage without any hesitation, I know that's a bird that's been here. And that was the proof, all the proof I needed to realize these birds do come back into a very small geographic area.
It's amazing, though. I mean, it really just is one of the things in nature that has always just confounded and fascinated me. And you're putting yourself into the kind of mindset of the birds, though. You're, taking their thoughts as much as you can or becoming ontologically as much as you can.
I try to imagine that they are incredibly smart. So I try to figure out what their strategies are. For example, when they're looking at food and they're trying to be territorial or they want to steal food, and the strategies they use to do that. So a little bird can actually displace a larger bird by jumping right behind it. And if the big bird has something in its mouth, it will probably drop it, and then the little bird can jump on it and take off with it. And I see things like that, and I just try to imagine, like, what can I do here? Looking at the direction the big bird is turned to, not paying attention, that kind of thing. And it's fun watching and being able to predict even what they will do next, based on having watched these birds thousands of times and having seen patterns now. But it's not robotic. It's not as though they don't have differences, but there's a likelihood with some of the birds that this is the behavior that I will see.
About 75% of them don't last very long, though, do they?
That was a shocking figure that I learned when I was doing the starting to watch birds, that 75, you're right, 75% of the birds never reach adulthood, never reach sexual maturity. And the reasons are many. And most of those, about 40% of that number, die in the first 3 weeks of fledging. They haven't learned to successfully forage or take protection. They stay out in the open too long. They may starve, they may be taken by other animals like cats. Cats prey on little nestlings that are on the ground.
Cats kill a hell of a lot of birds.
They kill between 1.5, the estimates are 1.5 to 4 billion birds a year.
It's a
And
staggering number. Yeah.
I saw a cat just last week kill a bird in my yard. I had never seen cats do that, but now I have 2 cats that come.
Feral cats?
No, no, they're a neighbor's outdoor cats, or
Yeah.
they go in and out.
Domestic cats. Yeah.
Domestic cats, and I discovered that they're very nice neighbor. I talked to him and he was horrified. But I found that there are certain myths that people have in their minds about that. For example, if they neuter the cat won't kill. That's not true. It does nothing to dampen that predatory instinct. The other is if you keep the cat indoors and let it out, keep it inside at night, it will not kill birds anymore. Well, they kill the birds during the day when they can see them and when birds are out. Birds are sleeping high in trees at night. So I was glad to dispel the myth of those things. I think if people understood, we shouldn't be shaming cat owners. These are figures I never knew. I never knew how cats kill birds. I had a cat. I used to let my cat outdoors. So I knowing what I know, I just like to let people know the basic facts about cats and birds.
Well, squirrels do a pretty good job of killing birds too. I mean, they have enough enemies to go around.
Yeah, well, there are certain squirrels,
crows kill a lot of birds.
Rats, crows, scrub jays. What they do, they don't necessarily kill birds, they kill nestlings.
Yeah.
So when they're in the nest and they're helpless, or when they're eggs, you'll have these natural predators that will take them. But a cat is not a natural wild predator, and they kill. They have been the reason for the extinction of many species, and you won't find that the fault of that line with crows or rats or squirrels. It's cats.
I'm getting some questions for you. I want to go to them, and thank you. Those of you who are sending in questions, feel free to do so. We'll get to as many as we can. Lots of things, obviously, I want to talk about with Amy, and this book is rich, and it's an experience. It's a splendid experience. Here's Reed, one of our regular people, who says, I have fed birds for years. Currently, I feed woodpeckers, scrub jays, chickadees, titmouses, nuthatches, towhees, finches, bullshits, I'm sorry,
bush tits.
Bush tits, yeah. Are those words permissible? As well as hummingbirds and peanuts for crows. I love birds. They delight me. Well, thank you for that, Reed. Sharon, certainly Amy shares in your delight, and I do as well. Here's Peter from Tucson who says, do you use iPhone apps like Merlin Birds from Cornell?
Absolutely. Merlin, the Sound ID is a way that I think a lot of people have gotten into watching birds, because you just turn it on and it records all the bird sounds it hears, and it will start listing the ones that are there. And the accuracy has really improved over the last few years. So, I've set it out there. There's a crow, hummingbird, bush tit, chestnut, chickadee, chestnut-back chickadee. It'll just go through a long list of them. And then you can play back and look at the spectrographic analysis and compare it to ones of actual birds and other apps and see how accurate it is.
Don't you also find sometimes that the musical nature of birds chirping and birds singing is really quite complex too?
It is. Well, first of all, of course, they have distinctive calls as well as songs. The songs you'll hear more in the springtime when they're courting. But for example, a Bewick's wren, one person who studied this fact of bird songs variations, he found that a Bewick's wren, a tiny little Bewick's wren that sings so loudly you can hear it above the other birds, had 30 or more variations of a song. And some of them have multiple songs, or in one song, a mockingbird will produce the equivalent of 15 to 20 different bird calls. He has integrated them all into his song, his or her song. So it's remarkable what birds can do with their voices. This little larynx that can produce two sounds at once, where um, I could never imitate, to any degree of accuracy, the way that a bird sings. Um, the most I can do is the intonation of a bird. I will call back with that. And surprisingly, it's enough for them to take an interest in and sometimes call back to me.
So how do you become their unreliable narrator, as you put it?
Well, the unreliable narrator in fiction relates to somebody who is telling you the story, but maybe they're prone to lying or exaggeration, or they're ignorant and they're making far fetched guesses. I am the unreliable narrator to what's going on in my yard because I'm not an ornithologist. I have not studied that much about birds. I'm just watching them. And so my guesses are not scientifically verified in any way. And I would call myself, as I narrate what I see here, an unreliable narrator, meaning don't use my book as a bird guide or any kind of ornithological authentic source of information. But the thing is, I never intended to write this for the public. This was my private journal. And it was, for me, it was so fun because it's the first time I'd done in years that was private for me, as opposed to a novel where I feel very self-conscious.
Well, why'd you make it public?
Because I hadn't finished that novel. And my editor, who asked me, he says, how's that novel going along? And I was like, derailed by election, derailed by COVID, derailed by birds. And he said, well, why don't we publish the Bird Journal? And I said, nah, you have no idea what this looks like. It's a total mess. It's just scribble and, these sketches, they look like cartoons. I had sent him some of the detailed drawings that are much more like illustrations in a way. And I said, they're not like those portraits of birds that I've sent you. They're really rough. And he says, well, let me see 20 pages. And then he submitted those to Knopf, the editorial group. And the gauntlet of people have to look at things before they say, yeah, we'll publish that. And they all decided, yeah, we'll do it. And I love my editor. And so I said, okay, we'll do this. Kind of wondering if I was going to regret it later. And I do feel now a degree of self-consciousness when I do things in my journal, knowing, well, I don't have to publish another one. Of course, I could finish my novel and publish that instead. But when I draw a bird now, I feel a little self-conscious knowing somebody's going to look at it and have a kind of an opinion they would not have had before I published this book.
Can I ask you a bit about, we got a lot of questions, but I want to find out your thoughts about drawing birds, because this was a task that you put upon yourself, and even now you speak about it with some self-consciousness. But like I said, some of the drawings are amazing. I went back and looked at some of Da Vinci's birds, which are remarkable, but they're mainly to inspire flight or to see how they get into flight. And then I was looking at Lady Gwilym, who is a great watercolor bird painter of Indian birds, of birds in India and so forth. Was there a prototype for you? Was there something, in other words, that you somebody that you looked at
Yeah,
specifically?
there were actually a couple. One is John Muir Laws. We call him Jack, and he was the one who held these classes on nature journaling. He also had special classes on birds, and he has a book called The Laws Guide to Drawing Birds and The Laws Guide to Nature Journaling. And that's really how I started to learn how to do this. I'm very bad at watercolors, and I basically stuck to graphite and then colored pencil. The other person is a bird artist named Keith Hansen, who is also an expert bird guide. And he has very detailed drawings of birds as well as watercolor. He's also illustrated a bird guide. Jack has also illustrated a number of bird guides, but it was his tiny details on his pencil drawings that really got me into this uh, love of looking at details and then trying to capture them. Because, and I did that because I wasn't so much interested in realism. I was interested in the meditative aspects of drawing, where you just want to represent every detail of the bird to appreciate how birds are put
It's
together.
what a good artist does, whether it's a novelist or a painter or figures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether you capture the spirit of the bird or some gestalt of the bird or
And the details.
Yes, and the details. Yeah. Yeah.
Here's a question from Hal in Billings, Montana, who wants to know, have you experienced a crow funeral?
I have. I created one that was I don't know, it might be unethical. But I had read this thing that crows will have funerals over their dead companions or a member of their family. They have very large clans. So I was being bothered in a way by crows that kept coming and upending the feeders, taking over the feeders and shutting out the little birds. So they were bringing their kids over to learn how to knock the feeders about so they could get seeds on the ground. And so I decided, what can I do to get rid of these crows? I decided I would put a dead crow hanging upside down in my yard. And it was only $14.99. I bought it at Wild Birds Unlimited. It was a fake crow, of course. And I mussed it up a little, made it look like it gone, just got defeated in a great battle, hung it upside down. And all of a sudden, there were crows flying from all directions. That surprised me. I thought the crows would come from one direction, but it was this as if they had called in the troops using WhatsApp, and saying, hey, there's been a murder of crow. And they all came and they landed in the tree and on the fence, and they were all screaming and crying. And I said, wait a minute, this is a fake crow. You're telling me you recognize this as a member of your clan? So I've decided that crows can be a little histrionic as well.
There's an aphorism I haven't heard before. Crows could be a little histrionic. I like that. Lately, I've been seeing vultures in my backyard, which is a little disconcerting. At first, I thought these look like hawks, and then I realized, no, they are definitely vultures.
Well, maybe you have a neighbor throwing out, leftover chicken or steak when they're done eating, because usually it's because there's a dead animal somewhere and they're going to feed on it. Yeah.
Well, there are a lot of coyotes who are taking care of to make sure that their animals are dead.
They might have left some parts around. Vultures will pretty much clean things down to the bone.
Yeah. Here's Kathy from San Francisco who says, I have a pair of mourning doves that live near me and spend a lot of time on my deck and porch. I love when they come to visit. Thank you for that, Kathy. And this is Ben from San Rafael, who says, have you seen turkey vultures feed? We saw over 30 line up, truly illustrating pecking order.
Yeah, yeah, that's funny. I have seen, of course, lots of turkey vultures over time, and not even before I started looking at birds, especially out in the country when you see there's been a large animal, a deer or something that's died, and then you will see tons of them.
Well, you've seen fighting over sunflower seeds, for example, right?
I have seen that. I've seen fighting over mealworms, and sunflower seeds where you have one bird on top, another bird on below the port where the seeds are, and they will, use their beaks or their feet and squawk and scream, and and I record this. I'm like a reporter at a boxing match. And red house finch on top, it's battling now with its claws on the female house finch on the bottom, who and looking at who wins and if there's any pattern, like does the one on top usually win as opposed to the one defending. And what I have found in my backyard birds is that birds are better at being aggressors than at defending, because their defense can be undone very quickly by surprise. So yeah, better to be the aggressor.
Speaking about aggressors, how do you feel about pigeons? Pigeons on the grass, alas, as Gertrude Stein said. I mean, they're looked at as scavengers, and yet a lot of people like to feed them and like them.
Yeah, yeah. I love all birds. So I love pigeons too. We don't have rock pigeons, which what you might call, church plaza birds or the kind of picnic birds that you see all the time. What I have are band-tailed pigeons, which are huge. Maybe people don't know this, but pigeons and doves are really basically this from the same family. They're related, very closely related. So you could call a mourning dove a pigeon, and you would not be incorrect. You could call a band-tailed pigeon a dove, and that would be correct as well. Um, they are a lot smarter than people think. There's a new book out called Pigeon Watching, and it is by Rosemary Moscow. And it's hilarious, but also scientifically true. What pigeons can do. They can remember things incredibly well. Most people cite the stupid things they do, like how they build their nest with a few twigs barely balanced on a limb, and that oftentimes just a breeze will blow it off and then all the nestlings will die. And that does happen, but there are many, many qualities. Now, I will say this about mourning doves. We always think of them as the symbol of peace and marital happiness. I've seen those birds really put up a big fight with other birds over food, and they puff themselves up. They look like the Hulk in feathers, and they look quite intimidating because they have pretty big feet, pretty big talons.
Here's a question from Jerry in Richmond, Virginia. He wants to know, it seems like, and thank you for this, Jerry, seems like hummingbirds are much more aggressive than they look at first. Has that been your observation?
It has been. They're very territorial. We have Anna's hummingbirds. There are others in California, but the ones that I always have. And I noticed that if I set out a feeder, there would always be one that would immediately claim it. They will do fights over feeders, and a lot of this is also related to uh, territoriality having to do with breeding and claiming the females of the yard. Uh, I've had a hummingbird feeder in my hand, and the male would come, and then uh, I would see it fighting off the other males, and then a female would come, and during courting, they would allow the female on the feeder, whereas normally they wouldn't. And the female has apparently watched this battle and decided this guy, he might be pretty good. So would watch him feeding, which she would not feed, would watch him feeding, and then they both took off and went to a branch. Now, I didn't look at what they were doing because I allowed them their privacy. But what I've heard is that she will splay on a branch and then he will do the deed, which lasts after all that courtship and display dives and everything. It lasts 4 seconds and then he's gone and there's no more. He doesn't feed her. He doesn't come back and take care of the kids. He doesn't help with building the nest. He's just gone to go find another girlfriend.
And what do we learn from something like that?
We learned that they're a lot like certain guys
Yeah, that's
in
what I
the
was
world.
thinking.
Yeah, no,
Mirrors of human behavior.
right, right. Yeah. You can look at it that way, but you can also look at the imperatives of survival, that birds that want to carry on their DNA or they need to protect themselves just to survive against other animals or birds or the elements, they have to do certain things. They have to conserve their energy, for one thing. They have to eat a certain amount over a period of a day, each day. And they have to fight off those who might take over their territory, which includes food and females. So it has to do with more than just some character, thug like, gang like behavior you might see in certain humans. Um, it has a lot, everything that a bird does has to do with survival.
You watch birds very carefully. You obviously love observing them and certainly take a lot of important observations from your and put them in the journal and communicate them to us. What do you tell so I mean, you don't have to be a proselytizer, but what do you tell the people who say, "What's the big deal with watching birds? I don't understand the thrill of it."
Well, it becomes, I suppose, in the way for some people, it's like when they were kids and they collected baseball cards. That is like, oh, I just got the Mickey Mantle or the Willie Mays one. Those are the ones that I valued when I was growing up. And it's a little bit like that. But if you're not a competitive birder who collects species like that, it's that miracle of seeing the bird and you actually look at it and you notice what it's doing. This is, and the second that that bird looks at you and you're looking at that bird, there's this amazing connection that you and a wild creature have just made, some kind of acknowledgement that you're occupying the same space, and it's okay. The other is the variety of birds. In the United States, we have a little over 900 species, and around the world, it's like 10,350, 365 or something. But you get to see such variation. The diversity is remarkable. And if you look at that bird and it's an adult, you have to say to yourself that percentage that we talked about, this bird has survived, um, whereas 75% of its kind has not. This adult bird before me is a survivor. So there are many ways you can look at birds. It is a symbol to me of survival, of renewal, and people can get a feeling of calm just looking at them. That uh, they show up. You can't say like to a you say to a dog, come, or Bobo, Bobo, where are you? You can't call a bird to you, maybe a pet bird, but I can't call my chickadees and say, come,
Well, you were talking
they'll
about
come with a food.
doves before. I mean, people could
Yeah.
send doves with messages and then they would come back. You
Yeah.
would train them.
Trained birds. Those I would, there are differences between birds that are domestic or domesticated, birds that are used in things like that. Or, for example, falconry, where the birds have been trained to fly out and then come back and land on, the hand of the falconer. Those are quite different from. They're still wild in a way, but they have been trained, and
Yeah.
you can train birds. But your wild birds that you normally see in the park or your backyard or walking along the street, they're wild. And the fact that a bird comes into your space and looks at you is to me a thrill. Um, to other people, I mean, we spend so much time, they're all out there and we never notice them. I didn't pay attention to them. And when you start noticing them and how different they are,
You're making me
and where
think of
you,
Yeats. You can tell the falconer from the falcon, right? I mean, there's that bond that exists,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
but not with the wild birds. And we're
yeah.
talking a little bit with you, another instance about Owen Deutsch, who did this extraordinary photography of birds all over the world. You feel a little constrained in your backyard? I mean, in the sense of all those other
Oh,
varieties of birds that are out. I mean, Owen has shot literally all over the world, places where
yeah,
birds are only in
yeah,
one particular spot, for example.
right. Yeah, his photos are amazing. And he's done a lot for American Bird Conservancy and donating books of his birds for new members. Um, but no, I'm not constrained at all. I have been birding in different countries, in South Africa, Botswana, India, in Rajasthan, also in Hong Kong, in Ecuador,
Burma?
uh, Panama. No, I've been in Burma, but I at that point I never really was focused on birds. But I have been to numerous countries to bird, and I find that I'm much more satisfied looking at the birds in my backyard. And that's because I can see them close up, and there's a certain reliability that the birds will come every single day, or a new bird will come and it will give me new bird tachycardia. And I'm just so excited to see a new bird. And it's personal. So that's just me. There are a lot of people who want to see as many birds as they can, and that's a different kind of birding. It's more competitive, either with oneself or with others, to collect as many species as you can. I don't do life lists like most people, but if I did, some people have given me the life list when we were together birding, and they keep that and they give it to me. And so I have well over 500 birds, even more because the earlier points I never even added them to a list. But that is not interesting to me. I don't like looking at birds day after day that are 300 yards away.
What do you think
It's
of your backyard as? A sanctuary, an aviary, a
a
metropolis?
hangout, Amy's hangout, Amy's bistro. No, it's not. It's a pretty good yard for a bird. It has a lot of oak trees. So birds that are attracted to oak trees, like the oak titmouse and the bush tit, chickadees, they and the pygmy nuthatches, they love those trees. And so I'm pretty much guaranteed to find those birds in my yard. There are other bushes and undergrowth that certain other birds, the feeders like. And then I just get these surprises. Right now, we have two great horned owls in the yard.
It's
They are in
exciting,
the
isn't
tree.
it? Yeah.
They were here for 8 months for a while, and then they flew off. They went to nest, and then they came back. This morning, they're here again. They were here last week, but for a while, they were here every single day. I mean, that's like seeing a miracle. It's like the divine or something paranormal, to see a gigantic bird right there in your tree. I don't even have to put on binoculars to look at them. We just look out the window and there they are. It's fantastic.
I got to read you this from Pamela up in Santa Rosa, who says, I was woken up in the middle of the night by a gray horned owl in a tree outside my window, keenly watching my cat, which spends time safely on our deck. Would an owl consider a cat for a meal?
Absolutely. Um, it the owl is weighs less than 4 pounds, but it has these huge wings and it can pick up very large creatures. For if it's a heavy animal like a cat, it could um, pick it up and then deposit it in an area and kill it on the spot on the ground and eviscerate it there. And I've seen animals eviscerated by great horned owls in our yard, actually, in a possum. And we didn't know what it was or who had done this. And Fiona Galugli, my mentor in curiosity, who since she was 13, happened to come over that day. She was 17 at the time. And I said, Fiona, we just found something, a carcass. And we would do forensics together. And she rushed over there down the little pathway. And she said, yep, that's a possum. And it was taken by a great horned owl. And you can tell because of the way it eviscerated, pulling the spine out forward. And yeah, so great horned owls can take a lot of things. And there are reports of chihuahuas, Yorkies, and cats being carried away.
Well, that's some serious kind of forensics. I'm impressed. This is a question from Kelly up in Portland, Oregon. Thank you, Kelly. Very practical question. Any advice on preventing birds hitting windows?
Ah, it is a terrible thing that happens, and to almost anybody who has a window on their house or apartment or whatever. Um, there are several different things, everything from putting decals or special windows that have in them stripes or patterns. What I ended up doing was trying to find something that was very inexpensive, because I would look at these coverings and realize you could certainly put them on, but it would cost, thousands of dollars if you have a lot of windows. And I wanted to advocate for anti-collision glass for birds. And what I found was a white water-based acrylic pen, like a Sharpie, and I drew spider webs all over my windows. And so you'll look at these beautiful 12-foot expansive window doors in my house. My house is basically a lot of windows, um, a lot of glass doors.
It's a great
And I
house, may I say.
covered this glass in the areas where the birds are. I covered the glass with these webs. And so there's not the areas, where they would have flown in. It's basically,
They
you have
avoid
to
the
have,
spider webs. They
they
actually
avoid the
avoid.
spider webs, that also they see the white, and it is less than, it's like 2 inches or less are the openings. So they're not going to try to fly through those openings. They will fly through a 4-inch opening, but not a 2-inch one.
Here's Reed again, who says, I find chickadees to be extremely bold and they get close to me when I'm in the yard. I try not to make eye contact. That seems to help them not flit away. One just now landed on my head.
Oh, wow. That is really cool. I would say that chickadees are, what I found are that the smallest of birds, like the hummingbird, the chickadee, the pygmy nuthatch, the oak titmouse, these are really tiny birds. And they are the bravest when it comes to approaching humans. Maybe it's because they know the humans are saying, "Oh, how cute! They won't hurt me," and they but what you have to do, it's not the eye can't contact so much. The minute you put up your binoculars or camera, they're going to take off. The minute you make a big move, like move your arm or move your body, take one step, they will take off. And it's their instinct to take off with that kind of movement. It's just like when the little bird jumps on the backside of a bigger bird, not even touching the bird, just on the back, they are going to take off. So if you're absolutely still and you're just sitting in your backyard, they will come. And if they know you're not a threat, they will start approaching very closely, especially if you have food.
You also have goldfinches and sparrows and certainly some birds that a lot of people are familiar with. Do you have a preference? Do you sort of have a favorite bird?
Well, it's changed over time. I don't have one favorite. I like birds for particular reasons. So the oak titmouse is just a kind of a plain drab bird to most people. I think he's very handsome and he's funny. He's such a clown and kind of hysterical in a way where he'll scold you. The first time I met one, he just scolded me because I was in his territory, which was our deck.
Excuse me, how did
And
he scold you? What did he do?
the scratchy
Yakking.
sound, and
Yeah.
they're looking at you and they're flying around you. And that's probably because it had a nest nearby. I didn't know why. We just thought it was really funny. I wasn't into birds at the time. It just that we moved into this house that had a veranda and it was between two oak trees. And obviously, this space between the two oak trees had belonged to the birds before we moved in. So I've loved the some other birds as well. The California towhee, again, kind of a drab bird to many people, kind of a brownish orange gray bird. It looks like an obese sparrow, and it is a sparrow, and it hops around the yard often in twos, a mated pair, and they just hop around there like this is their property, and they're making an inspection. Um, but my favorite right now, I do have to say, are the great horned owls. But part of that, not only are they magnificent and magical and mystical, it's because they have killed the rats that lived next door in the ivy. And we used to have them racing across our patio day and night. And and then suddenly there were none. Now we have one, and I'm hoping the great horned owls will take care of that one. And I'm talking to you now, but if I look up, I can see one of the owls. So I'm just using my powers of psychic communication to say, please take more of those rats
Those
because I
paranormal
will
things work,
not.
do they?
Uh, wishful
Those
thinking.
paranormal.
Wishful thinking sometimes works. Maybe it's called coincidence as well. But yeah, they're fantastic. And I watch them take off at night as well when they start to do their hunts. One thing that relates to what the person said about cats, looking at the owls, I discovered that they will not take your animal, most likely will not take your animal during the day, because all they do is sleep. Um, I had my whole porch screened off in fear that the owl would take my dog at night when I let my dog out to do its business. And instead, I would watch these owls during the day, and you could have all kinds of things going on. They would open their eyes and glare at you like, "What the hell are you doing? You're making so much noise." And then they close their eyes again and go back to sleep. If they woke and did anything else, it was just a preen. But I saw an owl with a squirrel splooting in front of it on a hot day. Splooting is when it's just lying on its stomach with all its arms and legs out. And it was right in front of the great horned owl. And the great horned owl did its neck rotation looking at it. And then it just went back to sleep. And after that, I said, okay, I don't have to worry. It's not going to take a 4-pound dog if it could have taken a 1-pound squirrel.
My dog barks at birds, and, I think about that biblical line, "His eye is on the sparrow." Uh, when there's a sparrow in the backyard, he starts to bark, or she starts to bark, excuse me, and, I know, I was thinking, in fact, Hitchcock has changed, it's still the case, I think, the way many of us view birds, especially in flocks in large
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah. I had that feeling when I was a kid. I didn't really look at birds, but after seeing that movie as a kid, I saw every blackbird in the sky as a bird that was in the movie and that it might attack me, which is really unfortunate. And I've met a few people who are incredibly scared of birds, like even tiny bird. And they say why they're so beautiful and friendly, and well, not friendly, but they're not aggressive, certainly to people, but they're still afraid of it. I suppose it's like people who get fearful around moths that flicker in a really fast way that, you just feel like it's going to land on you or something.
There are phobias for every creature that
Yeah.
crawls, walks, or flies, I think. And
Yeah.
here's Cindy from Denver, and thank you for this, Cindy. She says, on walks, it seems like bird parents often play injured to protect their babies. Is this common behavior?
It's common in certain species like killdeer. And I saw that same behavior in South Africa with the black crowned lapwing. Um, there are probably other birds that do that. And what they do often is they lay their eggs in gravel or even in, deer dung or something. And it looks a similar color. And the male is the one that will feign a broken wing and fly off in a low, broken manner. And the female will stay on the eggs, or it's just diverting the bird away from the nest. And when I see that, I kind of have to laugh because what it means to me is there's a nest nearby. Not that I would disturb a nest. I have never deliberately gone into my yard to look for a nest. Really respect the birds and what they have to do to survive.
The nests sometimes are remarkable in terms of the complexity of, call it the architecture of the nest. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're all different too, depending on the species. I did see one nest in our yard, and that was because it was in a lemon bush, and a piece of paper had blown and was stuck in the bush. And my goddaughter went to fish it out, and there inside the bush where the paper had been was a nest with a scrub jay on it. So that is the first nest I've seen in our yard, but I wasn't looking for it. It was just there. Um, it's pretty remarkable, especially little hummingbirds, how they put it together. When I found out that they use spider webs as, the silk of the spider web to line the outside of their nest, at the very last, one of the last steps is to wrap that around the nest so it can expand and yet still stay together, that it's anchored to a little twig on a tree, and it won't blow off. As the little nestlings get bigger, it can stretch out. So that's a remarkable nest as well.
You're going to keep drawing with birds?
Drawing birds every chance I get. I mean, I'm always looking at birds. Where I am right here at my dining room table, I have been looking at birds the entire time that we've been talking. As I said, I can
Oh, you
see.
still give me good attention.
I do. I can talk while still, I know how to multiplex. I can do a lot of things. But every now and then I have been doing, I did an interview once, and suddenly I saw a bird I'd never seen before in my yard. And I jumped up and I said, "Oh my God, purple finch." And then I sat down, and fortunately, the fortunate thing is that the people I was doing the interview were bird lovers. So, but I will refrain from doing that, Michael. I won't jump up, but if I see a brand new bird or something really unusual, I will tell you.
Well, you've given me the caveat. That's fine. In fact, I would
Yeah.
love to see your enthusiasm and excitement on that score. Is there a bird that you would really love to see that you haven't seen?
I don't have these wish lists. I've been blessed with more birds than I could possibly imagine I would get in my yard. So yeah, sure, it would be really great to see us. I would never put down a bird as on a wish list that I know would never occur in my yard. Although I've had birds from that are called rare vagrants that never should have been in my yard. But I almost feel if I were to ask for it, it would be to show a lack of appreciation for the birds I have in my yard. I'm a really laid back bird watcher as far as, I'm not ambitious like a lot of birders where they have to see new species all the time. I'm excited when they come to my yard, but I don't need to see them anywhere else. And I want them to come on their own and without my ESP powers of communication.
Well, birders are a different breed. I think you and I have agreed on that, and often very nice, generous, kind-hearted people.
Well, birders are of different kinds. And Chris Cooper, who I don't know if you had a chance to talk to him, he is a really wonderful birder friend who we bird in Central Park. And he wrote a book called Better Living Through Birding. And you may recognize his name as the guy who was in Central Park who had the woman who
He's the
threatened to
African American
call.
guy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So he and I have talked about this, and we agree that there are different kinds of birding. There's the birding that's very competitive, and you're going out to count as many new birds you've never seen before, and that you add that to your life list. Then there are birders, there are bird watchers like me, and you look at any bird. You don't care. It could be the same crow day after day after day. Or you can have people who look at birds and they have no idea what they're looking at. They see a black bird. Is that a crow, a raven, a blackbird? They have no idea. So, but they like looking at them. They like walking through the woods and seeing a bird, and they don't need to know the name of the bird to appreciate them. There are many different ways to bird. And I think I would like to get rid of the stereotype that in order to bird, you need to know the names of the species to immediately identify the bird in the tree that's far away.
I mean, you don't need that anymore. You just have
You
an
don't
app that
need
you
it.
can hold up the app and find out what the
Yeah.
bird is.
Just watch the birds. That's all you need to do.
And we should mention, lest people get confused about this, Chris was the guy who, I think we got a little elliptical on that. The guy who was
yes.
confronted by a woman because he was African American, and he was
Telling her to leash her dog.
yeah, telling her to leash her dog, and she
Yeah.
was threatening to call the police. And I mean, it was,
Yeah.
it was an awful.
She called them. She called them, but
and then she did
fortunately
call
they
them.
didn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was an awful.
She did.
I think it gave meaning to the name Karen with young women.
Unfortunately,
yeah.
yes.
But
Terrible name.
and remember, you got started in all this because you were sort of in a funk about all the racism, and here we
Yeah.
are. We've gone full
Yeah.
circle. But I
Yeah.
want to. We've got very little time left, and I want to give some plugs because people will want to see you and want to experience you. And September 18th, first of all, Foster Museum, wildwoods.org. That's at 6 p.m.
Wild Wonder.
Wildwonder.org. Excuse me. That's in Palo Alto. Let me give some of these so people can know where to find you. They can also find these on your website, I think, probably.
Yes.
But
Yes.
September 23rd, you'll be at Pen and Podium Series in Denver. We've had a number of callers this hour from Denver. Newman Center for the Performing Art. September 24th, Governor's Lecture in the Humanities in Lincoln, Nebraska. Lyde Center for the Performing Arts. That's in Lincoln, Nebraska. October 9th, Portland Arts and Lectures in Portland. We've had a couple callers from Portland, and the Arlene Schnitzer Auditorium. And November 4th, the New York Public Library, Lions Gala, New York Public Library. You can also get more information on her website at amytan.net. And always a joy to talk to you, and keep it up.
Yeah, let's do dinner and carry on the conversation.
All right. And love to Lou, and I hope we see you soon.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. And let me thank all of you who joined us for this live episode of Gray Matter with Michael Krasny. You can listen to us live every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Or on Apple and Spotify, and on our website at graymatter.show. If you haven't become a member of the podcast, I invite you to join by simply going to the website at graymatter.show, where you can find previous episodes of Gray Matter with Michael Krasny. And again, that's Gray with an E. Also invite you to mail any reactions, suggestions you might have to me at mkrasny@graymatter.show. Let's thank this great team of ours, the Gray Matter with Michael Krasny team of Alex, Shannon, Chad, Kevin, Colin, Jeff, Colleen, and Tanya. And a special thanks to our guest, Amy Tan. I'm Michael Krasny.